Content creation is responsible for the demise of League of Legends.
If more NA players were in LTA, we'd watch more. No, you wouldn't. Pro players, teams, coaches, their opinion doesn't matter.
Was this even a legitimate Worlds win?
Duo King and Tyler 1 on the same team might save League of Legends.
I'm not sure about that one. Hey everyone, Celeste. I have been an esports figure for just over 2 decades across a multitude of different titles that include RTS, trading card games, and obviously MOBAs. And today I'm surrounded by 20 Redditors.
I've been prepping this like for 3 days. All right. Hi, my name is Ann.
Hello.
And my take is that I think the 2021 through 2024 T1 roster has done irreparable damage to the way that we view esports. And I just say this because of the narratives that come out about this team. This team is incredibly successful, right? 2 worlds, several finals, right? But I think that the narratives around this team are like way out of control. I think that shifts the way a lot of League fans view the game. For instance, this most recent year when they won Worlds and they beat BLG, they beat Genji, suddenly they're team of the year, even though they didn't win, either of their domestic splits. They didn't win MSI. They won 1 tournament and suddenly they're team of the year. And I think that's really disingenuous to all the other teams throughout the year.
Well, I would have to ask you, how do you think it does irreparable damage? Because T1 is literally carrying viewership.
So
every single tournament.
No.
So HLE, Genji just had a series, and yet T1 versus HLE, which apparently should not be the finals, had more viewers. Riot is obviously very happy when they're there. So saying that they deal irreparable damage as they're one of the things that keeps boats afloat and single-handedly carrying LCK's average viewership as 1 team versus 9, that's crazy. So there's that. The other thing that I would say is that I don't think people realize that Worlds, the reason that Worlds is so impressive as a tournament win is because when all teams in the world are brought there in unison, it's essentially bringing everyone to a deserted island, putting them on the island and forcing them to do X task. And throughout the time that they're all there, they're refining it harder and better than they're ever going to do outside of that island. And because of that, they're able to do things that normally they're not going to do when they're not having that kind of rigorous pressure, training, environment, etc. that's provided by Worlds. So to win the World Championship is impressive in itself because it means the 5 players, when things are the most intense, they show up more than any of the other 5 players from any other team. Even though, yes, I do think that Genji, 300 days out of the year is going to best them in a best of series. But I do think that there's something impressive and fascinating about that particular 5's ability to show up at that island tournament.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think that it's just the way that a lot of fans view it, right?
Sure.
Like in 2022, when DRX won Worlds, none of the same conversations were being had. No one said that DRX was team of the year or whatnot, right? But suddenly, because it's T1 in 2024, T1 has to be team of the year. Faker has to be player of the year. I think that's a little bit disingenuous. The year before that, JDG lost 1 best of 5 the entire year. They lost to T1 in semis, right? And no one ever talks about that team as one of the greatest rosters of all time, even though they won everything that wasn't Worlds, right? So that's on the point about how impressive Worlds is. Because yes, I do admit that this T1 team is very impressive in their Worlds performances, but elsewhere they haven't been able to perform. But I think that the way that conversations are had about that T1 team are a little disingenuous. And as for the viewership point, I do agree. I know so many people who only tune in because it's T1, but I think that doesn't create a healthy environment because we have this narrative around, okay, now is Riot patching around T1? I'm not saying they are, right? But the fact that this conversation has to be had, or that conversation is even brought up, I think does damage the esport in terms of competitive just optics. Like if you look at patch 14.16, 14.17, 18, right? They're nerfing all the 80 carry mids that Faker was notoriously bad at, and they're buffing Ahri, Azir, they're buffing Orianna, they're buffing these control mages. And I think that it's better to build a more, loyal fan base to League of Legends esports in general than just T1 fans. I think T1 fans, while they are carrying a lot of esports sales and viewership, merchandise, I think that in order for League of Legends esports to be sustainable, we need to promote other teams. We need better storylines out there besides just the T1 storyline. And I think that's why this team's done damage to the esports scene because if you're someone like me who's a fan of the LPL and just watching these last few years and watching how the meta completely shifts towards T1 into Worlds, it does hurt a little bit and it does feel a little bit bad to watch this team win Worlds and it's like, oh, but like now what? Like, was this even a legitimate Worlds win? I mean, it is, but you know, it just feels bad as a fan.
On that point, I mean, you keep blaming the team, but it's not the team's fault. Like they can't control how casters, personalities, streamers, tweeters, you know, anyone reacts to their wins. So it has nothing to do with the team. It's not their fault that they're winning or that they're doing anything that they're doing. And I would agree with you that obviously other storylines and stuff should get built up. The problem is people there's not enough people with gravity that can build up such storylines. I would argue that one of the last storylines that came out of LCK is the Church of Chovy. I'm not there anymore. To make a lot of people mad on Twitter, you know, or during the broadcast, to get people upset enough to tune in to hate on me or to go to my Twitter to hate on me, and both of which are good in broadcasting, because it's better to have someone hate you or love you than to just be apathetic. Because in order to either hate or love, they must tune in. I would point out, though, that, you know, there's other people like Cadrol who have promoted like Zeus or The Shy. Casters have to do this, but the problem is that the broadcast over the last couple of years has begun losing power to the co-streamers, and so it's on the co-streamers and stuff to raise up people, which is why I used to always have guests on the stream, because I thought it was really important for pro players to build their brand, get exposure to fans, and raise themselves up so they can have longevity in esports, because I've been around 21 years, and I would like to provide platforms for pros to try to build their own brands. So why I was always pushing people to tweet, actively engage and stuff, but you can't get them to do that. And that's not the broadcast's fault necessarily. So circling back to T1, it's not good.
Right. I just want to say, like, I don't think it's T1's fault necessarily. I'm just saying that this team has done that damage, and it's not because, you know, they're not trying to damage esports. I don't think that, you know, Faker goes out there and he's like, I'm gonna kill viewership by just only having fans of me.
Viewership's dead and he leaves.
No, absolutely. Oh no, trust me, my girlfriend only watches T1 games, so I completely understand. And in order to kind of right the ship, I would say we need to have, like you said, more genuine conversations and more narratives built around not just this T1 team. Oh, they're like, the whole T1 is an inevitable gimmick. It's gonna, like, once they lose, I think it loses its, you know, its power.
The issue with that is that the mass majority of people in the scene, regardless of what they show you as public facing, are not, they don't care about, nor are they incentivized to care about the longevity of others. They would rather others stay down or are kept down or are pushed down, so that they can reap the rewards of whatever benefit the scene offers. So when you have stuff like this happening, yes, the scene will cannibalize itself.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi, I'm Arsh. My take is that Ironman drafting is worse than Fearless for competitive play. With Ironman, which is your idea where you ban the bans from each game as well,
Yes.
I think the primary goal of competitive play for Riot, and I think the draw that I've seen among my friends, is when the games look most similar to solo queue as, like, you know, most relatable. I think it'd be interesting to watch what happens to ADC players, for example, when you get to like game 4 of Ironman. And I think you probably have ideas on what they do.
Right.
But I think it would look so different from solo queue. It'd probably be bad for solo queue.
So Ironman in specific, one of the things that you commented on is that game 4 and game 5 would look very different from solo queue, but I feel like the solo queue argument doesn't really matter. What matters is viewer retention, storyline retention, viewer excitement, viewer engagement, social media, you know, attention, when you're going into game 4s and game 5, which are already really rare. In fact, leading even into LTA, moving into like near the finals, we hadn't had any game 5s.
Yeah.
Game 4s and 5s are already rare. So they are going to be the black sheep of the bunch in the first place. But they add a layer of excitement if you have Ironman. Whereas right now with Fearless, the tweets that I made from last year ended up coming true, which is teams have agreed upon stacked team compositions essentially, and they basically just trade them amongst themselves in best of 3s. What Ironman does is it allows you to stop that and extracts even in game 2 or game 3, because you can do more targeting things, you can do more divisive things in draft. Like, one of the reasons that game 2 game with Boss, where the enemy team picked 5 of his champions and then banned 2, by game 2, there was so much social media attention, more people tuned into that game because they're like, what does he play now? Because so many things are gone. So social media spawns like wildfire, and it can cause viewers to go to the game. And I think Ironman is important for the longevity of the game, because pro players have shown time and time again that they won't adapt, they won't expand their champion pools, and they won't do any of this stuff because they're not incentivized to, for the most part. And Riot has to step in, like they did with Fearless. And the same vitriol that I faced on Reddit last week in the comment section or whatever is the same exact thing that I faced with Nemesis in 2020 and 2021 when we initially proposed Fearless or Ironman.
Where I've seen, like when I've talked to pros about, oh, how much do you like Fearless? They're like, it's great. I get to play different champions. My instinct, though I haven't talked to like extensively, is like if I ask Masu like, hey, how would you feel about like learning Kai'Sa and then also Mordekaiser as your like 2 core ADCs for games 1 and 2? I think that would be like a very different thing, because it's also not something that you'd be able to easily practice in solo queue, because you'd be drafting so differently across the board.
So on the Masu topic, we're like asking pro players what they think. It doesn't matter ultimately, because what matters is the viewership and the fans, because the game dies without it. Pro players, teams, coaches, their opinion doesn't matter. The same way that if we let them, they would have just kept playing the same Azir Corki mirrors back and forth. They would have played the same 3 junglers, etc. And Riot had to step in and change that. The same way that Riot should step in again with Ironman to change that. If no one knew what League of Legends was, it was just a brand new game that just came out, and those were the rules, Ironman, no one would complain about it. The reality is that pro teams and stuff, they shouldn't have any opinion to weigh in on the matter, because viewership, like fans, etc., they're the most important metric always, and they always should be. And pro players that can't do Ironman or can't do Fearless, they disappear, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Because new players emerge.
Already happening.
Can, yes. It's already happening, yes.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Aiden. I'm really interested in the boundary of acceptable speech, and kind of going along with that, I'm really interested in how Riot can bring voice chat to League of Legends.
The thing about voice is it opens up gateways to new ways of discrimination. That's one topic of it. The other thing is that everyone gets to tiers through different means. Someone might get there just by only split pushing top lane, and that's all that they really know. They play 2 champions. That's, you know, they view the game from the lens of how their champion fits into the game in isolation. And so what ends up happening, I think, is very similar to things that we got to glimpse on public streamer tournaments, where they completely disagree with each other about how to play the game. And these are professional players or challenger players, etc. So now imagine the discourse amongst gold players, silver, platinum. They're all just going to start saying that someone's an idiot. No, we shouldn't do that. No, we can't go to Dragon. Someone is really adamant that you can just give this Drake, and someone's really adamant that you can't just give the Drake. And then we get all this other stuff going on. I think people have an idea that voice chat would fix those things, but I think that we've seen from the glimpses of streamer tournaments where we have listen-ins and voice comms that it's not the case. And I think it would be disastrous to allow solo queue to just sort of do that.
I think the discrimination question is really interesting, and I think we can look at other games. I've played a lot of games of voice chat, Valorant, Overwatch, and my voice tends to read as like very gay almost. So I'm often the victim of like a lot of these homophobic jokes just going on the whole game. And I can understand how that gets like annoying and grating at times, but even as a player, I don't know if I would really trade that for just the enjoyment of the experience of being able to talk to your teammates. And even if the interactions aren't always productive, it still ends up like making me want to go back and play the game. And another point you brought up was like, what is the competitive advantage of voice comms, which I think is pretty interesting from a linguistic standpoint. But practically, as you've talked about a lot on your stream with things like silent scrims, or like if you actually look at these voice comms from excerpts of pro games, you look at them, it's like, are these people really even saying anything useful?
Right.
So like that, I would say, is dubious. But going back then again to the example you mentioned of streamer tournaments, that is like the best league content I've seen for like the past 5 years. If we could get another tournament with like Duo King and Tyler One on the same team just yelling at each other the entire time, I feel like that might single-handedly save League of Legends.
All right, I'm not sure about that one. Well, I think it's objective in the sense that people get to tiers through different means. And because of that, they're gonna have different ideas of how to play the game. So even though they're communicating, doesn't necessarily make things better or worse. Yeah, I just don't see what it solves.
This kind of goes back to like, what is our approach to game design or interpreting like where a game should go? And I think people have this platonic idea of League as opposed to some of the more FPS games where it's a game where like I'm kind of just playing by myself. If my top laner goes 0-10, like fuck him, I'm just gonna try and win the game anyways. Like we shouldn't inhibit ourselves. Like as you're arguing against the last person with Ironman, like just because people have this idea doesn't mean that we should go with it if it means we're sacrificing other things that people might care about. I think there's no reason why we couldn't like port that same experience that people enjoy playing in Overwatch and other FPS games and bring it to League. You brought up the idea that people get to different tiers, like playing different styles.
Right.
And in games like Valorant, there's actually like an entire role on the team dedicated to kind of shot calling. And if they're like 7-13 at the end of the match, nobody really cares because they had like that cool pistol round strat that like won 2 rounds, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like it'd be really cool in League if we kind of pushed into more player narratives about like, oh, this person came up from solo queue, but they were only playing Malzahar mid and they were just micromanaging all their teammates like an RTS player. And like, what does that player look when now they're in pro play?
Right.
And now people are really interested, like, oh, what are their comms? What are their strategies? How are they building up their team, even if they're not like the most individually mechanically gifted player?
Concluding on the voice chat thing, I don't think that we're really like at arms over it. I just think my expertise would lead me to siding on the notion that it's not good. But I wouldn't care if it's implemented. So I don't feel very strongly about like, if Riot announced that it's coming in, I probably wouldn't use it. And I think we saw that in Champions Q2. Pro players in both EU and NA would not use voice chat with players that they thought were worse. Because they just thought, I shouldn't have to teach you the game or explain things to you. On the other topic that you're talking about, I would say that falls more on the responsibility of Riot and the team of the player to promote those comms and things, which we used to have, but then content on YouTube, started pretty much dying pretty much everywhere.
Hopefully with this event, FlyQuest can bring back the concept.
If we show a hand, would you use voice comms? 100%.
Hello, nice to see you again.
See you again, yes.
All right, so I'm going to start with the preface. If for people who aren't aware, I'm going to talk a little about the Gorilla Jones situation.
Sure.
So he said, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to go pro. I have what it takes. And you said you're going to fail because you haven't hit the upper echelon in a short enough amount of time. My point is, though, I don't think there's a ceiling on people based on how they did initially. I think the vast majority of League players, especially when they get to pro, have had systems that were sort of introduced to them over time that they actually were able to make it. The vast majority of League players will never be introduced to that.
Sure.
Making a challenger on their own, and they will have no idea how to actually make that next jump.
The Gorilla Jones thing, the reason that I pushed back as hard as I did is because I understand the industry from marketing, branding, financial perspective, and then a lot of other things. So Gorilla Jones, I think, is 20 turning 21, and he has a desire to go pro, and he struggles to even hold Grandmaster.
I think that him not being able to hold a challenger actually isn't even a prerequisite, given that maybe he's playing, like you said in the earlier chat, he's playing in a specific way that's not conducive to climbing to challenger consistently, right? He might be playing champs that are not viable.
Right.
He might be playing in playstyles that he could easily be coached out of. I don't know how much coaching he's received in the past from other coaches as well.
Right.
And then going pro itself is also different when we see players like Surdy, who is at the top of the ladder,
Sure.
struggle in pro too. So environment matters. I think a lot of players maybe could go pro. I guess my main point is that a lot of challenger players could go pro that haven't really been given that shot and are being told that they can't.
So it's always going to be case by case. My response to Gorilla Jones is not necessarily going to be my response to other players, although I did tell Surdy not to go pro because he was averaging 2,000 CCVs on Twitch. And in modern day, where Twitch is so much more lucrative.
You don't think it's beneficial to do both, though, if you have the option? Like, Surdy's not going to lose what he's doing on Twitch just because he went pro.
So much like Bwippo, who is one of my closest friends in the scene, Bwippo streams every day. And he does stuff. Bwippo would not have the first clue about content creation, monetization, and all this other stuff. He's going to delegate it to other people. And even though he can do both, it's no secret that by doing both, his content creation is just significantly worse off than if he was just primarily focused on that. There's very few people that have ever actually managed to do both. The big what if has also helped many people tune into someone. Nemesis before Los Ratones, where a lot of people would say he's one of the best Western players. A lot of people would say that he's not, etc. And you don't get a lot of insight into him. And those things help bolster string numbers and stuff. My main focal point is always longevity and career decisions that are based in logic, not feeling.
That's fair. Yeah, I think more players who are at that level that could actually explore both. And I definitely think that going pro could be an avenue to help your content as well. I mean, that should be on the org's end to also help promote, hey, you could do this better. Like we can also give you other assets. We can do content days with you, like on stream, stuff like that. So
Right. I don't think teams care. I don't think teams are cutting year after year after year content budgets.
which is also, I think, is a whole different topic, but it's a failure on the teams because they could also leverage some of that and be like, hey, we will help promote your streams. We would take a percentage cut of your earnings, but we're going to help you blow up. This is good for all of us.
Hi, my name is Nick. Nice to meet you. And my hot take is that I think content creation is responsible for the demise of League of Legends in North America.
Okay.
My argument is based off of 2 points. You've kind of already touched on both of them. So the first part, not in the content creators' control, but the monetary difference in value between content creation versus being professional, as you just mentioned. And the second thing is I think the narrative has transitioned from being solely in control of the Riot production team, which has always done a fantastic job of creating narratives, and now it's in the hands of content creators. And I feel now more than ever, especially when it comes to LTA content, a lot of the narrative around it is very negative and toxic. I guess my point is, when you look at the co-streamers in general and you see like what Cadrill's doing, and Cadrill's doing a great job in terms of, I watched a game where it was 2 bottom teams in the LEC playing against each other and just highlighting the good positive plays the teams are making, regardless of the overall standings and rankings of the teams, versus like what Dom does, where I saw he posted a video saying the title of the video was 15 years of competitive League of Legends equals this, and he just spent 80% of the time flaming Shopify Rebellion and digging pause for poor play. Like, it's hard to build a brand, especially as a player, and to me, we're really negating any effort by these players, regardless of how good they are, to try to make a brand when there's so much negativity revolving around them.
But you would be saying that Dom's viewers and Dom's viewership is directly responsible for the millions that would somehow tune out or phase out of watching, right? Or that, Cadrill is trying to list a lot of positives and highlights. There's a lot of funny data and metrics that go into both, but not only even just them, but like other co-streamers over the years, which is their like following, their social media numbers, etc., impressions that they get, and you can look at all of them versus the main broadcast numbers, and you can start to draw certain things. If the argument is that Cadrill is very, very popular and he highlights things even on the bottom teams, then it should dwarf a million times over anything Dom does, just going off numbers. But obviously that's evidently not the case with what's going on. So I feel like it doesn't make sense to use both, because one should almost knock out the other, or like just shine a larger light on something that's positive. So we had to sort of pick and choose what kind of damage is being done or what positivity is being done. And now we have like the streamer team with Los Ratones that is obviously driving a lot of stuff, and scrimming against them by proxy helps you. Or like get more eyes on you. This happens all the time. You see it, people get into streamers' lobbies, they get more viewers. I didn't necessarily hear what with co-streamers and stuff, because you listed 2 polar opposite examples. How would that directly be related to the demise of viewership? Whereas my view is, we knew that even in 2020 that the average viewer of LCS at the time, LTA now, was over the age of 21. And we know this because 1, Riot had the data, and then 2, Bud Light was a sponsor. Now everyone is going to be 27, 28. People just don't want to tune in to watch kids much younger than them play video games anymore. People don't want to tune into the same repetitive matches being played, which was why I pushed against or pushed for Fearless, Ironman, etc. I think there's a lot more that's going on that doesn't have to do with co-streaming. I think if you remove all the co-streamers right now in the world, it does not mean that everything returns to the broadcast. I think a fraction would return.
With the implementation of co-streaming and the reliance of Riot and the LTA into co-streaming being the main source of viewership, sure, while there's a lot of positives, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Cater really watches the LTA very often.
No, he does playoffs. Sometimes.
Exactly. So LEC, I watch his streams and he does a great job in terms of promoting that. In NA, there's not really that gap. Double lift, I will dominate. Those opinions are starting to resonate more. And as those opinions resonate more, any attempt, because I saw a stream where you mentioned that you feel like the modern LTA is full of mannequins. It's full of people who, there are just no storylines that they can base. There's nothing there's nothing interesting. Yes, exactly. And my point is that ever since there was a separation of Riot being solely in control of the production value where those storylines are created, that once that shifted to the streamers who had the responsibility to promote those storylines, they haven't done it, and it's on the reverse opposite effect, actually. Right. And it's impacting the marketability and branding factor of these players to where they don't even want to try, and I don't blame them. yeah, I just think it's done some pretty harsh damage to the league.
I don't think anyone really does negative stuff in LEC, right? But the viewership continues to go down, no? Or I could be wrong. I don't have the exact data.
Viewership is down throughout all four regions this year.
What's going on there? You can't attribute that to co-streamers because you're saying that they're mostly positive, right? And I think the other region languages are all positive.
Well, I think I played competitive Call of Duty for a few years, a long time ago, and I actually was a caster as well. You worked as a caster, so you should probably understand this. When you're doing analysis in the caster's desk, there's a certain way that you give that analysis. And there's a certain level of professionalism that you need to have on a public broadcast, especially something that's as large as a Riot broadcast is. And the analysis I'm referring to that can be toxic is when, for example, you might say, this person has single-handedly thrown the entire game off of one play. And sure, while League can't operate like that in certain situations, a lot of times, League is a team-based game. There's a lot of several different factors that can go into a team winning or losing. There's plenty of times where you said this team has completely thrown the game and they come back and they win the game. So while that isn't really like the peak level of toxicity I'm talking about, where, like I said, the I Will Dominate video, where he's pretty much, there was one thing in particular where he was begging for a replay so they could watch Palafox have a mechanical misplay, and it's like mechanical misplays happen as part of the game. Obviously, they're much more important at a higher tier of competitive level, but that would really hurt Palafox's branding in that situation, and him as a player, right? In that you have someone who's gaining a lot of viewership, isolating that player, and pretty much putting a spotlight on calling him trash, in my opinion. They're saying he's a bad player. So that's more so what those examples were relating to, in that with the separation of Riot no longer being in control, because if you watch the caster's desk, there's certain ways that they handle misplays and certain ways that they talk about it versus the co-streamers, which have varying effects.
I agree. So I used to refer to myself as I had LCK mode and then I had my stream mode. LCK me was very different. I had a different vocabulary, even if some people would argue that I somewhat still talk similar. I'm very restrained on LCK broadcast. And obviously it's because of the reasons that you listed, that there's a different level of professionalism. I realize those people aren't there for me, they're there for the broadcast. But on my own stream, I don't want to be dishonest if I think that something is really wrong or bad or something. And some people might argue that there's other examples or ways to go about it. And I think that's very fluff, and I think that there's too much data that shows otherwise across time. And these are going to be fields that most people aren't involved in. So they wouldn't know. It's just their opinion, sort of like how if more NA players were in LTA, we'd watch more. No, you wouldn't, because NACL is full of NA players and no one watches. I think Riot leaned into co-streaming more and more and more because also Riot's data showed that it needed co-streaming to stay afloat. I almost think it's like opposite of what you're saying in regards to co-streaming destroyed stuff versus it's actually one of the things that now we're kind of leaning on. Also, I think it's sort of like the future, which is content creator-led stuff with the assistance of Riot and like working together.
Yeah, I think my final point that I want to get across is that I don't think that it's the sole responsibility. Obviously, this is a much bigger, more complex issue. I just think that it is a subtle factor that a lot of people don't see, and I agree with you in that I do think there is plenty of benefits, but it's a double-edged sword in that there's also negatives that brings to people. But that's it. Awesome.
My name's Nathaniel.
No, sweet.
And my hot take is that coaching is useless below masters, and that the practice for lower MMR players is predatory in nature. For pretty much the majority of players, when you play ranked and you like play enough ranked games, once you kind of get settled into what your rank is, that's where you're going to be. And for most players, I don't think that any amount of coaching, especially paid coaching, is going to make you improve to such a degree where you can go like a bronze player will become a diamond player, because the bronze player will always fundamentally misunderstand how the game is meant to be played. And as a result, them shelling out, $250 to Nice for an hour to get yelled at, it seems pointless. And it also, makes them not want to play the game, or they, develop bad, even worse fundamentals.
Okay. So saying that it's just useless, well, useless to who? Because we have piano lessons, guitar lessons, baseball lessons, whatever. If it's a hobby that you just enjoy, it's not inherently useless. If it's just something that you want to get better at, maybe you want to learn something that is present inside of the game, it's not useless. If the idea is that you're doing it with a goal in mind to reach a certain point, I would agree with you to a certain degree. I don't think it's inherently useless. I do completely agree with you that nowadays it is predatory. Yeah. People buy Google slots, So their sites appear on top. They do really scammy things. They don't vet people properly. Coaches do not do a thorough enough job with educational things. And I obviously got into that drama where I called out Nice and tried to promote other coaches, one of which was Alois. So I agree with you there. But I don't think that inherently saying that something is useless based on an arbitrary metric or by claiming what the person's value is out of the coaching makes any sense, because it just doesn't.
I totally agree with you on the Masters thing.
Yeah.
Because me hitting Masters now means less than it. Like me hitting Masters a year ago is not the same like level of achievement as it was like when it first came out.
Right, exactly.
Or a lower percentage of players were there. But for like the coaching, like when I say like the broad majority of people, like it's useless to them, it's because most people think that just by getting coached, they'll get better without like the proper mindset of, I'm going to go get coached in these particular things because I know I'm suffering in them, and they'll be able to guide me to a better understanding of like what my deficits are. Like people who go into that, like of course are always going to be more successful.
Yeah.
But I think that because we both agree on it being predatory, like it's not pushed, it's not advertised that way. It's advertised as, come pay $250, you'll climb in rank.
This is actually one of the reasons I stopped coaching, is because supply demand reached a certain point where I was having to be paid a certain amount for my time that did not match what I'm able to give the other person.
Right.
I tried to cap myself at 125, and that wasn't enough. I could have gone up as high as Max Waldo, who actually, Max has a different argument on this. Max was actually consistently getting $400 an hour from people, which is actually above Nice. But you know, unlike Nice, Max is actually both good at the game and highly articulate and like other stuff. So with that, you know, it gets into this weird situation with coaching. I will say, which goes into his point, that I don't think that everyone can become a pro, and very often that was the request of many people. They would contact me at, you know, Diamond 1 Master and say, I want to go pro, and I don't think that that is possible.
Thanks.
Hi, my name's Nicholas, and my topic point rather is that the game's health is sort of in dire straits, right? Because it's becoming harder and harder and harder for new players to get into the game. I guess I have had friends that I want to get into League and who want to play League, and I find it where it's like I'm trying to tell them what to focus on or try to like give them advice on like, hey, you need to learn the items. So I wonder if Riot were to, in ranked specifically, cap the amount of players or characters that are in it, or craft a meta for an entire season where it's like, hey, we're going to axe these 100 champions. And so these 68 whatever are going to be for the entire ranked season, this meta of champions. Would that even work in terms of like making the game more approachable for new players?
So there's two different topics going on here. So the argument of making the game more approachable for new players, you're specifically saying Summoner's Rift, while not acknowledging that there's other game modes that exist to help new players learn the game. When I first started playing League of Legends, I know Jace was out, so that was champion number 100. And I think at this current point in time, we're 170. Riot's answer to this is, in addition to the WASD movement, Brawl. Brawl is an 8-minute game mode. Or it's meant to be. And much like if you play trading card games or something and you get to experience a new set, if you do it in a draft format, you see all the cards. The games are just going, you're cycling, everyone has different decks, etc. You're seeing everything. Brawl is a really good stepping stone to Summoner's Rift, where I agree with you, in Summoner's Rift, you might just see the same few champions over and over and over, and you don't even see anything. And when I was first playing League, it felt like Pokemon, you know, and there were no, I mean, there's guides and stuff, but that requires a lot of time. So Brawl is a really good stepping stone. Arena is a good stepping stone. That's intentionally why these things are there. That's why they're being made.
Right.
And that's why WSD is coming in. And I think that's also why Wild Rift was partly made. Riot is trying to find ways that acknowledge that people don't have a lot of time and acknowledge that the game is very overwhelming with the barrier to entry. And they're trying to make ways that you can play with friends, even if you don't know anything, and the game mode's fast and fun.
No, I definitely see that those game modes are specifically built for that. I guess more like, so in that scenario of like, hey, if they tried that, where like they would craft a meta for a season and take like 70 champions just out of the game, specifically in ranked, would that even work or be healthy for the game?
You kill their product, right? They can't generate money. Some people only play the game for their specific champion. Right. And so, are you gonna make a concession where, okay, well, Lux, Yasuo, Ezreal, these champions must always be in
These
the
one
50.
tricks only say,
Yeah,
but everyone has a one
right,
trick.
right, right.
Every champion has a
Exactly,
one
yes.
trick, so that wouldn't be okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
One of the conversations that I did have with Riot internally or privately is one of the suggestions that to cause viewership to be different, they could do sealed formats across regions. So NA could be given this pool of 100 champions, Europe's given this pool, Korea's given this pool. Makes every region look different. And then there's the Worlds tournament, which everyone's given the same pool. That's a different argument to Ironman. It's different. And again, this is a alteration off of card game formats that exist.
Right. So it wouldn't be
Draft.
it wouldn't be in addition to Iron Man. It would be replacing Iron Man.
It would
with
be an
that
alternative.
instead. Thank you so much.
The topic that I do want to talk about is one of the main things that I argue about with Twitter all the time, or just anyone in general. Most people don't have discernibility to tell the differences. And thus, this makes debates and conversations, even between figureheads, personalities, whatever, often a popularity contest more than anything else.
Yeah, I guess to a certain extent, I agree with you. But just to take that one step further, I think you would probably say that you have this like discernibility, but really what you're referring to is probably certain proxies that you're looking at in a player's gameplay. Like, what's their APM? Are they using F keys? Like, how close are their clicks to their player character? And I think on one hand, you can say that like anybody else, if they agreed with you that these are important proxies, could probably gain some of that discernibility and find similar players who are just as good. But then if you go one step further from that, why are we using proxies instead of the actual performance itself? So I think no matter which way you cut it, whether it's discernibility, scrims, what have you, at the end of the day, it's just going to boil down to a popularity contest, as you said.
Right, and that's part of the problem, though. One of the things that I've always advocated for, and I know that Dr. Respawn has had conversations with me even publicly about this, is the need to demonstrate. I'm always an advocate about demonstrating. It was what I always, tried to push people to do. Whenever I would argue for the demonstration of freezing or demonstrating this, it's a demonstration that I'm arguing for. It's not I'm LS. It should have nothing to do with that I'm LS, like the mid-turret argument. The mid-turret argument is not an argument because I'm LS and I'm saying that mid-turret is bad. It's because of what I can explain on why it's bad, and then I can respond to any questions thrown at it as to why it's bad, and I can keep going and demonstrating why. And nowadays we have practice tool that can, it can go more than just one person. No one uses it. Very few people use it, which is really sad and, unsettling almost. The discernibility thing that I'm mostly talking about that wasn't about like the F keys and hotkeys and all this other stuff that you were referring to is if you see a trade unfold in a game in mid lane or, maybe a team fight, do you have the wherewithal to realize what the alternatives were? Do you see how the person could have stepped differently, aimed a skill shot a different way, and because they didn't, that's the blunder? Could they have gone to Baron instead of Dragon based on X, Y, and Z reasons without just relying on the results? Because when you just rely on the results, you can get really false data that can lead you into doing the same thing over and over. One of my main gripes, and we've actually seen the evolution of like natural evolution in League, the NARAMs have stopped the last few years. One of the things that I used to complain about, they're actually much more rare nowadays because intuitively pro players got their ass kicked enough by failing a NARAM and losing the game over it that now intuitively we get the 5 minutes of doom because they've realized that NARAMing is a lower EV than just farming waves, letting the waves walk up. And it took them years to do this. The same way that when Riot nerfed lane swaps in March, my immediate tweets in response to the PPE changes is lane swaps aren't nerfed, here's how you still do them, but it took 3 months to come back because people weren't gonna read the data and demonstrate that it's still viable. And that's the main fucking point. People seem to think that I just wanna be right or that I'm appealing to my own authority or I'm appealing to my own history and stuff. It has nothing to do with that. It's always been demonstrating, and it's really alien and weird to me that people don't want demonstration and they oppose it almost. Even often just appealing to authority, right? The famous clip of Kadril saying that I just say 100 things, some stick, whatever. A lot of the things that he said in that clip came true after enough time passed that year.
I think
Sorry, that was long.
This could also be like a linguistic problem too, where I think a lot of the times the language that is being used, people, it just flies by people's ears.
Yeah,
and I
that's
think
a problem.
if they understood you, they might agree more. Like when you talk about a lot of options that people can do in lane, like, oh, get soul instead of baron, XYZ, they'll be like, oh, people are human, they're going to make mistakes. So this is why XYZ is actually better. And then it turns out that statistically, this other strategy allows you to make more mistakes and still win the game. So I think maybe what it comes down to is people just not understanding things like statistics and risk at a high enough level.
Sure, that is the problem. And I don't like to limit my language. I like to be really specific with words that I use. That's why I used to just always look up words and whatever so that I could be more accurate. Some things obviously that I've learned over the years is that people have different interpretations of what a word means or definition. Sometimes people are not native English speakers, and so I struggle with that. It's advantageous to speak at a 6th grade level. That's just objectively true. I really struggle with that when having conversations. So the question that I wanted to ask is how many people think I don't include human error in things that I say? If there's any raise of hands.
I think I'm full of factored in, but a lot of what you talk about is math.
Sure. But how many people think I don't entertain that I'm talking about human beings when I'm suggesting like they should do this or that? Okay, you do. Okay.
Bias group.
Sure. Perhaps. So in regards to that, how is that possible when the advocacy that I preach for in draft allows the team to make more errors and still win? How is that not a direct appeal to human error? That is directly correlated with the acknowledgement of humans. Because if it was the opposite, well, fuck, Lee Sin's the best champ in the game, Karthus is broken, we're all going to script like Kog'Maw, everyone's going to space glide on Twitch, and obviously I'm not doing these things.
I can answer like what's happening to a certain extent, is that people come into your stream with a certain model of how the game is played and how it should work. And even if they hear you say something, they plug it into their model and they're like, oh, in my model, that's something that it seems like like human error would prevent people from doing. So again, we go back to language, like how can we create a shared model of the game that allows people's ideas to interact with each other using the same basis of understanding. To a certain extent, this is like the entire problem of like humanity and our democracy is how can we come to a understanding of a shared factual basis from which we can build on and hopefully like reach this discernibility or reproducibility.
If you liked this content and you want to see more things like it, you can make sure to like and subscribe here at the FlyQuest YouTube channel.